And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're glad you've decided to join us this morning. We're dealing today with an issue with the Oklahoma Lawyers Association and how it differs from the Oklahoma Bar Association. And Thad Balkman's going to clue us in.
Yeah, Thad was kind enough to join us today and talk about the new association in town. It's a lawyers group that's gotten together to do some very specific and important purposes, most of which our viewers I don't think have heard much about. And so this will be a good chance to find out about it.
All right, Thad Balkman, today's guest on The Verdict. We'll be right back with more.
A greener planet, cleaner air, a healthy economy, national security, a smaller deficit and a stronger dollar, green jobs, better jobs, energy independence, warmth and light and transportation. These are the reasons Chesapeake champions natural gas every day.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we want you to meet Thad Balkman. Thad is the executive director of the Oklahoma Lawyers Association. He did his undergraduate work at Brigham Young University, did his law work at the University of Oklahoma, thanks to an uncle, Stan Moore, dragging him out to Oklahoma, and we're glad that that happened. Thank you, Stan, again. He served in the House of Representatives as a Republican from the Norman District for 6 years. In 2007, he was inducted into the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy Hall of Fame because of his ongoing work in defense of abused and deprived children, and he's to be congratulated for that. He's involved in many charitable and civic activities in addition to he and his wife raising 5 kids. This is his first visit to The Verdict. Thad, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
Glad to have you.
Tell us about this organization, the Oklahoma Lawyers Association, and how does it differ from the Oklahoma Bar Association?
Well, the Oklahoma Lawyers Association was created last fall. It was created out of a recognition that the Oklahoma Bar Association really cannot engage in lobbying activities because in Oklahoma, all lawyers are required to join the bar. We're a mandatory or a unified bar state. And so the bar has made attempts in the past to try to have a presence at the Capitol, but at the end of the day, the bar has significant limitations on what it can and cannot do as far as participation at the legislature. So the Oklahoma Lawyers Association was created to work with the bar and kind of fill that gap, to be there, to be the voice of the legal profession up at the Capitol.
I know the Bar Association in years past has done some work and performed some studies on the propriety of certain legislation. Was that a task taken on by them at some risk?
Well, the bars had I think you're referring to the Legislative Monitoring Committee. And, I think obviously when you give an opinion on a subject that's a hot button subject, whether it be tort reform or caps on what attorneys can make, there are very strong opinions on both sides of those issues. And so certainly I think the bar has probably taken a few arrows over the years when it has weighed in on subjects.
Now, you're the first executive director of the Oklahoma Lawyers Association.
Yes.
It started when?
We started last October, 2009.
And where does the where does the executive director get his orders? Where do you get your marching orders?
Well, I answer to a board. We have a 12-member board of practicing attorneys from around the state. Our board is very diverse in its makeup. Lawyers that represent different legal professions, different political ideologies, trying to get a real representative sample of the bar, or, at least the legal profession in Oklahoma.
Now, how are they selected? How's the board selected?
Those members were, if you will, nominated by people that I know and trust. I worked closely with people that I practice law with to try to identify. Trying to start an organization, you got to start from somewhere. So we identified folks that we thought had good standing in the community, good reputations, and we selected them. And as we go forward, we'll probably have a rotation system where every couple of years we'll rotate people off, and we'll accept nominations from the board for their replacements.
Do most states have a similar organization working the legislature?
You know, we're kind of a unique organization. I did a real thorough investigation of what other states do, what their bar associations do, because quite frankly, originally before the OLA was created, we thought maybe the bar could kind of step up its lobbying efforts. So there was really a look done at what other state bar organizations do, and found that in most cases, in other states, certainly states surrounding Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Texas, Arkansas, their state bar associations do have a pretty substantial lobbying effort. But Oklahoma is kind of a different route because of its unique relationship with the Supreme Court, where it's almost in some respects an arm of the judiciary branch. Oklahoma, that's why we created the OLA, to kind of to fill that need that was there.
Now, so this wasn't some sort of hostile creation? Did the bar?
No, not at all.
Did the bar come up and say, "Hey, we don't want a separate organization," or did they realize the difference?
Actually, we have a really good, friendly working relationship. John Williams, the executive director of the Bar Association, and I are good friends. We speak, I won't say on a daily basis, but several times a week to coordinate what's going on. And so we have a very good working relationship. In fact, John Williams and also John Parsley, the president of the Bar Association last year in 2009, they both gave me a lot of encouragement to start this organization.
So many issues at the legislature are partisan in nature, and so I'm wondering, how do a lawyer association, are you all associated with or vaguely affiliated with any political party, or are you just looking
not
at
at
lawyers
all.
in general? Because lawyers have all sorts of interests. I mean, by their very nature, they have to represent almost every view. So how do you have an association that has to represent people who represent everything?
Well, it's tough. It's tough, Mayor. You know, I kind of see the OLA almost in the sense of as a chamber of commerce, but for lawyers. Just as you have the state chamber, the Oklahoma City chamber, who represent a variety of different business owners, some small businesses, some large businesses, and oftentimes there's even differing views within the chambers.
So you're not representing really the beliefs of individual lawyers, you're representing the vocation itself.
The common interest of the profession.
How are attorneys, how are lawyers affected by legislation, regardless of how they feel about individual issues?
That's correct, that's correct. There will be differences of opinion, just as I mentioned, our board, we've got family lawyers on our board, we've got employment lawyers. They have different interests, but what we do is we identify issues that are of concern to the entire profession, and we go about educating legislators on those issues.
Well, I think you've preempted the question with an awfully good answer. I was going to ask you how you got your agenda to know what you were supposed to do on a given day. Who gives you your marching orders about what positions to take on the legislation that's pending?
Well, I get my marching orders from our members and from our board. As we identify bills, and of course, bills can have many different forms, right? Oftentimes, the language of a bill will change overnight when you blink. So we have to be really careful about monitoring bills on a daily basis. That's what I do. As I identify issues, I bring those forward to our membership and to our board, and I say, hey, I think this may be of interest. And oftentimes, the answer coming back is, you bet it is. Go up there and start doing your job. Oftentimes, we'll have members that will just contact me and say, hey, I've got a question about this bill. There are some cases where legislators actually come forward and say, hey, thinking about amending this bill with tweaking this part of the code, what do you think about this? So that's my job, is to kind of assimilate the information and then stake a position for the OLA.
There was a perception in the bar, I think, in some circles, that the last session of the legislature, pardon me, was excuse me, particularly hostile to the Bar Association and to lawyers, and some legislation aimed directly at the Bar Association. Did that have anything to do with the formation of your group?
Well, I think it was a great wake-up call. I think it was a wake-up call to the legal profession in Oklahoma. In other words, most lawyers are too busy practicing law, and some obviously have an interest in politics, but I think that really got a lot of lawyers' attentions. Lawyers that don't otherwise pay attention to what happens at the Capitol, but they thought, my goodness, the bar's under attack. There's bills out there that would do away with paying dues to the bar, and so I think that served as a great wake-up call, and I think it actually helped make it easier for the OLA to get acceptance from members of the bar and actually up at the Capitol. I think people see, you know what, the lawyers need to have a voice up there.
Yeah, refresh my memory on that legislation. It didn't pass.
No, there was legislation filed. I don't know, it didn't pass. I'm not even sure how far it got in the system, but just the mere filing of the bill, the fact that it was out there and that it was actually being promoted by the Senate leadership was enough to know that it was serious.
Most of whom are lawyers.
Yes, they are. They are.
Thad Balkman is running the Oklahoma Lawyers Association. We're learning more about it today on The Verdict, and we have some specific issues that they're dealing with, and we'll get into that on the other side of this break. We'll see you in a minute.
This cane is called For All the Grandfathers, and I dedicate it to my grandfather, Franklin Allen. Me and him just had like a spiritual thing where I just learned lessons from him without him telling me anything. The 3 dots on the feather represent my immediate family, and as my grandfather told me about the Chickasaws, that family is the most important thing. To me, the eagle sees everything, as our elders do, also representing my grandfather and his bravery in the Korean War. I actually just started on the wings for the eagles, and that's when my mother called and told me that he passed away. He took his journey. It's like somebody watching you when nobody's there. I guess he wanted me to finish it, so I finished it. He's been with me ever since. It shows how strong a Chickasaw family can be.
What's your idea of security? A good-paying, sustainable job, a solid economy, less dependence on foreign energy? We can achieve it with the help of one industry, American oil and natural gas. It creates energy, jobs, and a strong economic base we can rely on. New technologies open vast reserves that will supply our energy needs far into the future. Because security, by every definition, is worth protecting.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're talking to Thad Balkman of the Oklahoma Lawyers Association. What legal issues are you looking at currently in this legislative session?
Well, there was a bill actually filed way back clear last September, H.R. 1065 by Representative Reynolds and Ritzie, that dealt with the legislature convening a court on judicial complaints to remove a judge, Judge Bartheld, down in Pittsburgh County. That resolution kind of sat there throughout the fall, of course, because the legislature wasn't in session, and it sat through the first couple months of the legislature not getting touched, and then here very recently, a week or so ago, the House set that resolution on its general order and actually was prepared to debate and vote on it. Luckily, one of the representatives, Representative Dan Sullivan, who is an attorney from Tulsa, he said, wait a minute, I think we need to lay this bill over and study it a little bit more. That resolution in particular draws our interest because as attorneys, we care a lot about the separation of powers and protecting the judiciary's independence from the executive and the legislative branch. I'm kind of in a unique position in that as a former legislator, I typically want to make sure that the legislature is the strong branch, and I think in many senses they are. But I think the OLA, we're very concerned about any attempts to take usurp power away from the judiciary, and I think that this particular resolution is of great concern because it says that anytime, the precedence that it sets is anytime the legislator gets mad at a judge's decision, they can just go and file a resolution and call for the judge's removal. And I think that's kind of dangerous. I don't think that's certainly not the way that our founders founded our country nor our state. They want a clear separation between branches of government. So I think that's something that we're really concerned about, and I hope that we can kill that legislation, and we're certainly going to be monitoring and looking very closely for any future attempts to do something similar.
Well, of course, our state judges, no matter what level they serve, all serve at the behest and the approval of the voters.
Absolutely.
They have to go and be voted on at every level. They're not immune from that.
They all stand for election.
As federal judges are immune from having to do that, and sometimes those arguments get kind of mixed up.
Right.
Judges have the same kind of approval process, if you will, that legislators do. And we already have a court on the judiciary that is in place, do we not, to deal with such matters?
We do. And Eric Mitz is who oversees that. There's a 3-member council, if you will, that starts that process, and there's a very clear process how that can work. And under the Constitution, there is a provision where the legislature can convene that. However, that's not really how it was set up, because if the legislature convenes it, then all of a sudden you're making the legislature be the prosecutor and the defender. And I don't know that, particularly in a year like this when we have some really pressing budget needs and some other concerns, I'm not quite sure that most Oklahomans would agree that the legislature needs to be convening court in addition to all its other duties.
Let me back up and just give some very basic stances. A person graduates from law school. Are they then a lawyer? Can they call themselves a lawyer?
Well, they can say that they have a Juris Doctorate degree.
Okay, but they can't say they're a lawyer.
Well, they need to be licensed from the state.
So they have to pass the bar.
They have to pass the bar.
Okay, and so in Oklahoma, it's compulsory to not only be a member of the state bar, but also the county bar. And so,
No.
Actually, no. In
It's not.
Oklahoma, you simply have to join the state bar. You pay your annual
Okay.
dues to the state bar. Here in
I'm
Oklahoma,
glad I asked.
Well, yeah, Oklahoma County has a very strong active bar, as does Cleveland County, Tulsa County. Most counties have a county bar association, but that's completely voluntary.
I see, but you don't have to be a member to operate legally.
That's correct.
In that county.
That's
okay.
correct.
So why then would you then need to have the Oklahoma Lawyers Association? I guess let's get back to that,
Sure.
to that basic question.
Well, it goes back to, I think, one of your first questions, and that is that while the state bar does a great job, it puts on many CLE programs. There's all kinds of services that members of the bar receive, and county bars also in many cases do a good job of offering continuing legal education programs. Certainly my county, Cleveland County, does that. There is not an organization in Oklahoma that represents the legal profession up at the Capitol, and that's what we do on a daily basis. I'm at the Capitol when the legislature's in session. That's where we are. We're monitoring.
Do you
those
find
bills.
yourself at odds with elected officials who are not lawyers?
No, not at all. I mean, in fact, there's some elected officials who are lawyers who we have been at odds with. The fact that a legislator is an attorney or not, really, I don't think is the.
It's not define your friends.
No, it does not define our friends at all. I found that in most cases, legislators welcome our input. There's bills up there, and I found this as a legislator too. You can't be an expert in everything, right? And so when someone files a bill on guardianship or probate, most legislators, if you put the truth serum in them, would say, I don't know a thing about this. I would sure like to have someone who has some expertise kind of help me out on this. And so that's the service we provide. We can go in and counsel with these legislators and give them tips and advice from practicing attorneys. I'll go back to our relationship with the Bar Association. For example, the family law section is a very active section of the bar. Lots of attorneys. They even have a legislative subcommittee. We've been very active working with the family law section this session, reviewing bills that get filed, and then asking practicing family lawyers from around the state, what are your thoughts on this bill? And what they've done is they typically will assimilate those thoughts, put them in a memo format, give that to me, and then I go up to the Capitol building and share those thoughts with the legislators. And they've really appreciated that. In most cases, they've said, they've thought of things I never even would have thought of. I'm glad that we have their input.
One thing I left out of your introduction that I'm sorry I did, but I want to bring it up now. It's further qualification for the work you're doing now. But you were selected to be a commissioner on uniform state laws.
Yes.
By representing the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
And that, Mick, is of course a very prestigious position because we have a lot of laws around this country that are uniform from state to state, or pretty much so. They aren't federal, they're state, but they're all alike. And that's what the commissioners on uniform state laws deals with, are changes or new ones to laws that ought to be uniform from state to state, and Thad was our representative for a number of years.
Got to work with Fred Miller, a
Yes.
professor from OU, commercial law, and He does a great job. He's been on I think he was the founding member of that commission. I'm not sure if he was or not, but he's been on that forever.
A long time.
And they provide a great service helping legislators
What
out.
are the pros and cons of having a compulsory system where people have to be a member of the bar? I'm sure that's an issue that were that an issue, the OLA would take a stand on that. Why do some states have it compulsory and some don't?
You know, I think it really goes back to how state constitutions were laid out, how the profession came about. I know I can really only speak to Oklahoma because that's what I know. In Oklahoma, the licensing of attorneys is actually through the Supreme Court. In other words, the diploma or the thing I hang on my wall along with my diploma, the license, that's granted to me by the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court has actually, if you want to say maybe farmed it out to the bar to handle the actual collection of the dues.
So the bar is sort of an agency of the state
In some
Supreme
respects,
Court?
yeah, they're almost like a licensure board.
Are they funded?
No,
through
not
the
at all.
state
They don't
Supreme
receive.
Court?
They don't receive any state funds at all. It's completely dues driven. They probably make a little bit of money off of CLEs, probably not enough to pay the bills, but they make some money. So I think the value in having a unified state bar is you have one central place where lawyers can go and make sure that they're in compliance with their continuing legal education requirements. They do a great service working with the different courts around Oklahoma, the different district courts. And so there's a definite need for Oklahoma. And I can tell you this: when I was looking into what other states do, I was really impressed. I thought, man, Oklahoma, we really have our act together. Now we didn't. I think we had a definite need as far as our legislative activities goes, but as far as the other services that bar associations provide, Oklahomans ought to be really proud. Particularly Oklahoma attorneys ought to be proud of their bar association. They do a great job.
Yeah, particularly, Mick, another example would be if a lawyer does something to cause someone to think that lawyer ought to be disbarred, license taken away. The action to disbar that lawyer is handled by an arm of the Oklahoma Bar Association, not the Supreme Court. But the Oklahoma Bar Association presents the case ultimately to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is the one that disbars or doesn't disbar the lawyer. So the Bar Association performs a very integral prosecution and ethical enforcement mission.
So if someone is in another state and they're a practicing attorney in New York or California, they cannot by nature execute any sort of legal profession in Oklahoma unless they pass the bar or unless they associate with Oklahoma lawyers at the time.
Well, there are some reciprocity states where some states, state A will say, if you'll let my graduates or my lawyers come into state B, we'll let B graduates come into state A.
Really?
Yeah, without taking the bar. If they've
Texas
already-
and Oklahoma have that kind of
But
relationship.
not all states, it doesn't
Not
work
all.
in all cases.
Not all states, and so sometimes an attorney can get not licensed, but they can be recognized by a court or a judge for a specific case, but it's a case-by-case basis,
That
and they
seems
have to
very
associate
messy.
with local counsel.
how do you, we just got 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
How do you explain the almost frontal assault on judicial independence that's going on in the legislature now?
Well, I think in today's day where you can access information at your fingertips on the internet, you see these decisions out of Major County or Pittsburgh County, and the whole world knows about one really bad decision a judge made, and so it's really easy to mistake one bad decision or poor decision by a judge and say, well, you know what, the whole legal system needs to be changed. We need to throw all these judges out. And I think that's unfortunately what happens is we confuse sometimes one decision with the whole profession.
We're going to have to make that the final word. Thad Balkman, thanks for coming on the show.
Good luck.
Thanks again. I appreciate it,
Oklahoma
guys.
Lawyers Association. We'll be right back with more. A final word.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Mick Cornett and Ken Myers wrapping up a show with Thad Balkman. We discussed the Oklahoma Lawyers Association and what it's offering to attorneys across the state.
Well, it's offering a voice. The Oklahoma Bar Association, for a number of reasons, is just frankly not a lobbying organization, is not authorized to be. The Supreme Court is not an authorized lobbying organization as well, although they can make their views known as they choose to do it. But most every other profession and business in Oklahoma has some sort of connection with the lobbying organization to make their views known on legislation that affects them. Up to now, lawyers have not had that, and now they do, under Thad Balkman's capable leadership. And I think we'll see at least other views expressed to legislators on things that are of interest to the bar, and the judiciary. The bar just is not protecting the lawyers, it's also trying to protect the independence of the judiciary as well.
Thad seems like an excellent choice to run
Well,
that organization,
really is.
being a former state legislator and also an attorney.
Yes, very active and very bright.
We have a couple of websites we'd like to draw your attention to. If you have first of all, a question about this particular show and you'd like to get in touch with Thad or someone else at the Oklahoma Lawyers Association, here's their website information. It's oklawyers.org. That's OKLAWYERS.org. And we have a website too. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have an idea for a show, let us know about it. It's theverdict.tv. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.